In the competitive world of Chicago's architecture firms, Marcus Chen and Daniel Foster begin as mentor and protege, building a relationship founded on mutual respect and shared ambition. But when a career-defining project forces them to compete against each other, their bond fractures under the weight of professional jealousy, personal pride, and misunderstanding. This is a story about ambition, loyalty, and the painful journey of learning that success means nothing without the people who helped you get there. The foundation. The Chicago wind cut through the streets like a blade that November morning, carrying with it the scent of Lake Michigan and the promise of an early winter. Marcus Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of Foster & Associates' 23rd floor office, watching the city wake up below him. At 32, he'd already made a name for himself in architectural circles, not bad for the son of immigrants who'd run a small restaurant in Chinatown. "You're here early." Marcus turned to see Daniel Foster emerging from the elevator, 2 coffee cups in hand. At 47, Daniel cut an impressive figure, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confident presence that made clients trust him instantly. He'd founded the firm 15 years ago, building it from a 2-person operation into one of Chicago's most respected architectural practices. "Couldn't sleep," Marcus admitted, accepting the coffee. "Keep thinking about the Riverside project." Daniel smiled, the kind of smile that had made Marcus want to work for him in the first place, warm, genuine, encouraging. That's what separates good architects from great ones. The great ones lose sleep over their designs. They stood together at the window, 2 men separated by 15 years and a generation, yet united by their passion for creating spaces that mattered. Marcus had joined Foster & Associates 5 years ago, fresh from completing his master's at MIT. Daniel had taken him under his wing immediately, seeing in the young architect the same hunger that had driven him to start his own firm. "I've been thinking," Daniel said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "The Thompson Cultural Center competition, I want you to lead it." Marcus nearly dropped his coffee. The Thompson Cultural Center was the biggest project to hit Chicago in a decade. A $50 million development that would transform 3 blocks of the South Loop into a community hub featuring galleries, performance spaces, and educational facilities. Every major firm in the city would be competing for it. "Daniel, You're ready, Marcus." "More than ready." Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "I've watched you grow from a talented graduate into one of the best architects I've ever worked with. This is your moment." The words filled Marcus with a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. Daniel had been more than a boss, he'd been a mentor, sometimes even feeling like the father figure Marcus had lost when he was 19. His own father had worked 18-hour days at the restaurant, always supporting Marcus's dreams even when he didn't fully understand them. "I won't let you down," Marcus said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus threw himself into the Thompson project with an intensity that surprised even him. He arrived at the office before dawn and left long after the cleaning crew had finished. The design that emerged was bold, innovative, a structure that honored Chicago's architectural heritage while pushing toward the future. Glass and steel curved in ways that seemed to defy gravity, creating spaces that felt both intimate and monumental. Daniel stopped by Marcus's desk regularly, offering suggestions, challenging assumptions, pushing Marcus to dig deeper. Their late-night design sessions became legendary in the office, 2 minds working in perfect synchronicity, building on each other's ideas until something truly special emerged. "You see how the light will move through this space?" Marcus pointed to his renderings one evening, his eyes bright with exhaustion and excitement. "From sunrise to sunset, the building will transform. It'll be like watching the city breathe." Daniel studied the designs, and Marcus watched his mentor's face carefully. After 20 years in the business, Daniel still got that same look when he saw something exceptional, a slight widening of the eyes, an almost imperceptible intake of breath. "This is extraordinary work, Marcus. This could define both our careers." The presentation to the Thompson Foundation was scheduled for a Friday in early December. The morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of crystalline winter day that made Chicago's skyline look like something out of a dream. Marcus had rehearsed his presentation dozens of times, but standing in Foster and Associates' conference room, preparing to pitch to the 6-member selection committee, his hands shook slightly. "You've got this," Daniel whispered, just before they entered. "Remember, you're not just selling them a building. You're selling them a vision of what their community could become." The presentation went flawlessly. Marcus spoke with passion and precision, walking the committee through every aspect of the design. He explained how the building would serve not just as a cultural center but as a gathering place, a symbol of the neighborhood's resilience and creativity. The committee members leaned forward in their chairs, asking questions that showed genuine engagement. When it was over, the committee chair, a woman named Patricia Morrison with steel-gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes, stood and shook Marcus's hand firmly. "Mr. Chen, this is some of the most thoughtful work we've seen. We'll be in touch within 2 weeks." Walking out of that conference room, Marcus felt like he was floating. Daniel threw an arm around his shoulders as they waited for the elevator. "I'm proud of you, son," Daniel said, using that word he'd only said a handful of times before. "Whatever happens, you should be proud of that work." But something in Daniel's voice made Marcus look at him more carefully. There was pride there, certainly, but also something else, something Marcus couldn't quite identify. It was gone in a flash, replaced by Daniel's usual warm smile, and Marcus dismissed it as his imagination. The office celebrated that evening, champagne in the conference room, congratulations from every team member. Marcus's girlfriend, Jennifer, a pediatric resident at Northwestern Memorial, arrived straight from her shift, still in scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. "I'm so proud of you," she said, wrapping her arms around him. "My brilliant architect boyfriend." "Don't jinx it," Marcus laughed. "We haven't won yet." "You will," she said with certainty. "I know you will." That night, lying in bed in their small apartment in Wicker Park, Marcus stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion. He thought about his father, wished he could have been there to see this. The old man had died of a heart attack 2 years ago, never having stopped working at the restaurant, never having fully understood why Marcus had chosen such an impractical career. But he'd supported it anyway, in his quiet way. "You okay?" Jennifer mumbled, half asleep beside him. "Yeah," Marcus whispered. "Just thinking about what comes next." What came next arrived 12 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon when Chicago was being pummeled by an early snowstorm. Marcus was working on renderings for a smaller project when his phone buzzed. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. "Can you come to my office?" Something in Daniel's tone made Marcus's stomach tighten. He grabbed his notebook and headed down the hall, passing through the open workspace where 20 other architects sat at their desks, the sound of keyboard clicks and low conversations creating a familiar soundtrack. Daniel's corner office looked out over the city, now barely visible through the driving snow. He stood at the window, his back to the door, hands clasped behind him. "Close the door, Marcus." Marcus did, his heart beginning to pound. He'd seen Daniel in many moods over 5 years, but this rigid, distant posture was new. "I got a call from Patricia Morrison this morning," Daniel said, still not turning around. "They want to move forward with the Thompson project." Relief flooded through Marcus, so powerful it almost made him dizzy. "That's incredible. Daniel, we did it, There's a complication." Now Daniel turned, and Marcus saw his face properly. The warmth that usually lived there had been replaced by something harder, more guarded. "The Burger Group is also moving forward." The Burger Group was their main competitor in Chicago, a larger firm, more commercial, but with a reputation for solid, if uninspired, work. "So they're narrowing it down to 2 finalists?" Marcus asked, trying to understand. "Not exactly." Daniel moved to his desk, picked up a document. "The foundation was so impressed by what they saw from both firms that they've decided to commission both designs. They want us to develop them further, present again in 3 months, and then they'll choose the winner." "Okay," Marcus said slowly. "That's still good news, right?" We have 3 months to refine our work, make it even better. Marcus. Daniel's voice was strained. I'm going to lead our second presentation. The words hung in the air between them. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the chest. What? This is too important, too high profile. The foundation specifically mentioned they want to see the principals of both firms presenting. It's a $50 million project, Marcus. The biggest thing we've ever bid on. But it's my design. My work. Marcus heard his voice rising and forced himself to lower it. You said this was my moment. And it still is. You'll still be the lead designer. You'll still get full credit. But I need to be the face of this presentation. It's business, Marcus. You'll understand when you're older, when you've been doing this longer. The dismissal in that last sentence stung more than anything else. When you're older. As if everything Marcus had accomplished, all the late nights and innovative solutions, meant nothing because he wasn't yet 40. I see. Marcus's voice came out flat, dead. Don't be like this, Daniel said, and there was a note of pleading now. This is about protecting the firm, about putting our best foot forward. You're brilliant, Marcus, but you don't have my experience with these high-level presentations. The committee needs to see stability, experience. They need to trust that we can deliver. So my work is good enough, but I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying, Daniel? Marcus felt anger beginning to burn through the shock. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're taking my project. It's not your project, Marcus. It's the firm's project. Everything we do here belongs to Foster and Associates. The coldness in Daniel's voice was like nothing Marcus had ever heard from him before. This wasn't his mentor, his friend. This was a businessman protecting his interests. I need some air, Marcus said, turning toward the door. Marcus, wait. But Marcus was already gone, striding through the office, grabbing his coat, ignoring the curious looks from his colleagues. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, needing the physical exertion, the burn in his legs as he descended 23 flights. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, fat flakes that stuck to his hair and coat. Marcus walked without direction, just needing to move, to process what had just happened. He ended up at Millennium Park, standing in front of Cloud Gate, the Bean, watching tourists take selfies in their reflections despite the weather. His phone buzzed. Jennifer. Hey, I'm on a break. Want to grab dinner tonight? Marcus stared at the message, not sure how to respond. How could he explain what he was feeling? The betrayal, the anger, the crushing disappointment. Can't tonight. Work stuff. Tomorrow. He put his phone away and stood there in the snow, watching his reflection in the polished steel sculpture, distorted and strange. He thought about the last 5 years, every late night he'd spent at the office, every time Daniel had praised his work, encouraged him, told him he was ready for more responsibility. Had it all been manipulation? A way to keep Marcus working hard while Daniel reaped the rewards? No. That wasn't fair. Daniel had been genuinely supportive, genuinely invested in Marcus's growth. But this decision, this choice to take over the presentation, it revealed something Marcus hadn't wanted to see. At the end of the day, Daniel saw him as an employee, not an equal. Not a partner. When Marcus finally returned to the office, it was nearly 6 o'clock. Most of the staff had left, fleeing the worsening weather. Daniel's office light was still on. Marcus knocked, entered without waiting for permission. I'll stay on the project, he said, his voice carefully controlled. But after this is done, I'm giving my notice. Daniel looked up from his desk, surprise and something like pain crossing his face. Marcus, don't make decisions in anger. Let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. I'm making mine. This firm is your home. I'm your. My what, Daniel? My mentor? My friend? Marcus shook his head. Friends don't do this. Mentors don't steal their protégés' work. I'm not stealing anything. You'll get credit, I'll get a line in the credits while you stand in front of the committee presenting my ideas as if they're yours. Yeah, I understand perfectly how this works. Marcus turned to leave, then paused at the door. You know what the worst part is? I believed in you. I believed in us, in what we were building together. But you just proved it was never about us. It was always about you. He left Daniel sitting at his desk, and he didn't look back. The snow was still falling when Marcus emerged onto the street, but he barely noticed. Everything had changed in the span of a few hours. The foundation he'd built his career on, his relationship with Daniel, his place at Foster and Associates, had cracked wide open. And he had no idea how to put it back together. Or if he even wanted to. The cracks appear. The following morning, Marcus arrived at the office at 6 a.m., earlier than his usual early arrival. The city was still shaking off the previous night's snowstorm, streets lined with dirty banks of gray slush, the sky a pale, exhausted blue. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night staring at his laptop, looking at architecture firms in other cities, imagining a life somewhere else. Jennifer had noticed his mood when she got home from her shift. They'd sat on their couch, her hand in his, as he explained what had happened. Maybe he's right, she'd said carefully. Maybe this is just business. You don't believe that? No, she admitted. But I also don't want you to blow up your career over pride. It's not about pride, Jen. It's about respect. Now, sitting at his desk in the empty office, Marcus opened the Thompson project files. If he was going to stay through this, and he'd committed to finishing it, he'd do it right. But he'd also start building his exit strategy. Daniel arrived at 7:30, stopping by Marcus's desk. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his usually immaculate appearance slightly rumpled. We need to talk, Daniel said quietly. About the project or about us? Both. They moved to the small conference room on the 22nd floor, away from the main office. Through the windows, the morning sun was beginning to warm the city, melting the snow on the buildings across the street. I didn't sleep last night, Daniel began, sitting across from Marcus. I kept thinking about what you said. And you're right. Partially. Daniel ran a hand through his silver hair. I should have discussed this with you before making the decision. That was wrong of me. But Marcus, you have to understand the position I'm in. This firm has 23 employees, most with families. If we don't land this project, I might have to let people go. The economy's uncertain, competition is fierce. I can't take chances. So you took a chance on me for the first presentation, but now that it matters, you don't trust me. It's not about trust. Then what is it about, Daniel? Marcus leaned forward. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you used me to do the creative heavy lifting, and now you're swooping in for the glory. Daniel's face hardened. That's unfair and you know it. I've spent 5 years investing in you, teaching you, promoting you. And I've spent 5 years making you look good. How many projects have I delivered ahead of schedule? How many clients have I saved when things went sideways? Marcus felt his voice rising again and forced himself to breathe. I earned this presentation, Daniel. I earned it with 5 years of work. You're 32 years old. The committee wants experience, stability. Stop hiding behind age. If I'm old enough to design the building, I'm old enough to present it. They stared at each other across the table, and Marcus saw something shift in Daniel's expression. The warmth was gone completely now, replaced by a cold calculation. Fine, Daniel said. You want to present? Present. But if we lose this because the committee doesn't trust a 32-year-old to deliver a $50 million project, that's on you. And you'll be the one explaining to our staff why they're losing their jobs. The words hit Marcus like a slap. Daniel stood, straightening his tie. You have 3 months to refine the design and prepare your presentation. I suggest you use the time wisely. He left Marcus sitting alone in the conference room, feeling simultaneously vindicated and terrified. He'd won, but at what cost? Daniel had essentially blamed him in advance for any failure. The pressure that had been intense before now felt crushing. Marcus pulled out his phone, stared at his father's contact information, still in his phone 2 years after his death, a number that went nowhere. He wished he could call, hear his father's accented voice, get his practical advice. But his father was gone, and Marcus was alone. The next weeks were brutal. The office, which had always felt like a second home, became a minefield. Daniel was professionally polite but personally distant. They communicated through emails even though their offices were 50 feet apart. The staff noticed, of course. Whispers followed Marcus through the corridors. Did you hear they had a huge fight? Daniel's thinking of letting him go after the Thompson project. I heard Marcus is planning to start his own firm, poach half our clients. Marcus ignored the gossip and focused on the work. He refined the design, ran structural simulations, consulted with engineers and contractors. But the joy was gone. Every line he drew, every detail he perfected, felt tainted by the conflict with Daniel. Jennifer became his anchor. She'd come home from 12-hour shifts at the hospital, exhausted from dealing with sick children and desperate parents, and still have the energy to listen to Marcus talk through his frustrations. Maybe this is a blessing, she said one night in late December. They were decorating their small Christmas tree, a tradition they'd started when they moved in together 3 years ago. Maybe this is pushing you toward something better. Or maybe I'm throwing away a good thing because my ego got bruised. Your ego didn't get bruised, Marcus. Your trust got broken. There's a difference. She was right, as usual. But that didn't make the situation any easier. In January, Marcus got a call from an old friend from MIT, Sarah Wu, who'd started her own small firm in San Francisco. She'd heard through the architecture community about Marcus's Thompson design. People are talking about it, she said over the phone. Saying it's some of your best work. How did people even hear about it? The competition's not public yet. You know how it is. Renderings leak, committee members talk. Architecture's a small world. She paused. Look, I'm expanding my firm. I need a partner, someone with your talent and drive. If you're interested in the Bay Area. Marcus thanked her, said he'd think about it. But the call planted a seed. He started imagining a different life, San Francisco, a fresh start, a partnership instead of a subordinate role. He and Jennifer talked about it late into the night. I'd have to find a new residency program, she said. But it's possible. If this is what you really want. I don't know what I want anymore. By February, the redesigned proposal was nearly complete. Marcus had taken the original concept and elevated it. The building now incorporated community feedback gathered through a series of public forums, featured more sustainable materials, and included flexible spaces that could adapt to the neighborhood's changing needs over decades. It was, objectively, brilliant work. Even Daniel couldn't hide his admiration when Marcus presented the updates to the firm's partners. This is exceptional, Daniel admitted, studying the new renderings. The committee's going to love this. Thanks, Marcus said flatly. Marcus. Daniel caught his arm as he was leaving the meeting. I know things have been difficult between us. But when this is over, when we've won, and we will win, I think we should talk about making you a junior partner. Marcus looked at Daniel's face, searching for sincerity, for the mentor he'd once trusted completely. He found only calculation, a business owner trying to retain valuable talent. Let's just focus on the presentation, Marcus said, pulling his arm free. But Daniel's offer gnawed at him. Junior partner, it was what he'd been working toward, what he'd dreamed about. But did he want it anymore? Could he stay in a firm where the person at the top had proven they'd always put business before relationship? The final presentation was scheduled for March 15th, a Friday that arrived with the first genuine warmth of spring. Marcus spent the morning going over his notes, practicing his delivery. Jennifer had taken the day off to be there for support, sitting in the apartment's small kitchen as Marcus paced and rehearsed. "You're going to be amazing," she said, grabbing his hands to stop his pacing. "Marcus, look at me. You're going to walk in there and show them why you're brilliant. And whatever happens after, with the firm, with Daniel, with all of it, we'll figure it out together." He kissed her, grateful for her steadiness, her unwavering support. At the Thompson Foundation's headquarters, a converted warehouse in the West Loop with exposed brick and soaring ceilings, Marcus arrived to find Daniel already there, talking with Patricia Morrison and another committee member. Daniel looked up as Marcus approached, and for just a moment, Marcus saw something like the old warmth in his expression. "Ready?" Daniel asked. "Ready." They were ushered into a large conference room where the full committee sat, 6 people who held the future of this project in their hands. The Burger Group had presented earlier in the day, and Marcus could see their materials still on the table, slick, professional, safe. Marcus took a deep breath and began. For 45 minutes, he walked them through the design, but more than that, he walked them through a vision. He talked about the neighborhood's history, its diversity, its resilience. He explained how the building would serve not just as a space for art and culture but as a hub for community organizing, for education, for bringing people together across the divisions that plagued American cities. He spoke about his own story, the son of immigrants, someone who'd grown up in Chinatown understanding the importance of community spaces, of places where people could gather and remember who they were, where they came from, what they could build together. When he finished, the room was silent. Patricia Morrison had tears in her eyes. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That was extraordinary. Give us a moment to confer." Marcus and Daniel were asked to wait in an adjacent room. They sat in uncomfortable chairs, not speaking, the tension between them a physical presence. 20 minutes later, they were called back in. "We've made our decision," Patricia said. "Mr. Chen, your design, your vision, it's exactly what this community needs. We're choosing Foster and Associates." Relief, joy, vindication, all of it flooded through Marcus. Daniel stood, shaking hands with the committee, professional and gracious. But Marcus could see the calculation in his eyes, the wheels already turning about how to use this win. Outside, on the street, with the March sun warming their faces, Daniel turned to Marcus. "Well done. Truly. This is going to change everything for us." "For me," Marcus corrected. "This is going to change everything for me." "What do you mean?" "I'm leaving, Daniel. After we finish the Thompson Center, I'm out." "Marcus, don't be stupid. I'm offering you a partnership. A junior partnership. In a firm where I'll always be junior to you, always subordinate, always fighting for scraps of respect." Marcus shook his head. "I deserve better than that. And I'm going to find it. You're making a mistake. You'll never get a project this big on your own. Maybe not. But at least I'll know the work is actually mine." Marcus walked away, leaving Daniel standing on the sidewalk, and for the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. Separate paths. The spring of 2024 in Chicago was unpredictable, warm days followed by sudden cold snaps, as if the city couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Marcus felt the same way about his own life. He'd submitted his formal resignation to Foster and Associates on March 20th, agreeing to stay through the Thompson Center's groundbreaking in June. 3 months to finish what he'd started, and then, freedom. Uncertainty. Both felt equally possible. Daniel had accepted the resignation with a tight-lipped nod, then immediately called a staff meeting where he announced that Marcus would be pursuing new opportunities, and that Foster and Associates wished him well. The office erupted in confused whispers. Several colleagues cornered Marcus afterward, wanting to know what had really happened. "Sometimes you just need a change," he told them, keeping his voice neutral. He wouldn't badmouth Daniel, despite everything. That wasn't who he was. But the rumor mill had no such restraint. Within a week, the architecture community in Chicago was buzzing. Some said Marcus had been pushed out. Others claimed he was starting a competing firm to steal clients. A few suggested he'd gotten a massive offer from a New York firm. The truth, that he'd simply reached a breaking point with his mentor, seemed too mundane for gossip. Jennifer helped him set up a small home office in their apartment's second bedroom. It was barely big enough for a desk and a drafting table, but it was his. He registered an LLC, Chen Architecture, and started building a website. Sarah Wu called again from San Francisco, sweetening her offer of partnership. "Come out here, Marcus. Fresh start, no baggage. Plus, you have to admit, the weather's better." He promised to visit in July, after the Thompson groundbreaking. He wanted to see all his options before committing. Meanwhile, the Thompson Center project moved forward. Marcus worked mostly from home now, attending only essential meetings at Foster & Associates. The distance made collaboration difficult but also kept him away from Daniel's increasingly cold presence. They communicated through terse emails, their once fluid creative partnership reduced to bullet points and schedule updates. In April, Marcus got an unexpected call from a developer named Robert Zhang, who'd built several successful mixed-use projects on the north side. Zhang had seen Marcus's work through industry channels and wanted to talk about a potential residential tower in Lincoln Park. "I don't need big and flashy," Zhang explained over coffee at a Starbucks in Old Town. "I need smart, sustainable, community-focused. Your Thompson design showed me you understand that." The project was smaller than Thompson, maybe a $15 million budget, but it would be entirely Marcus's. His first major independent commission.